um, so that anybody who is unable to make it can join us and learn about this project. So again, thank you all for joining. Um, if you could, please take a moment to introduce yourself in the chat, who you are, what your name is, where you work, or what community you represent, and what balance of state COC region you are operate services in or interested in operating services in. That'd be helpful for our purposes. Again, we're recording this all, and we are also going to follow up with an email to everybody who is in attendance today and who's filled out the letter of intent. So you'll be getting all the materials that we discussed today in your email, hopefully by the end of the day, if not first thing tomorrow morning. Also, as we go through, like I said, we have a lot of content to get through, a lot of nuanced content. So we're going to be focusing on the application process today. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat. We will do our best to get to every question that comes our way. And if we run out of time, we will follow up via email and make sure that all questions get answered. So just go ahead and throw those in the chat as they come to you. Okay, so our agenda today, we're going to do a quick overview of the COC funding competition. If you were not able to attend the webinar we hosted last week, that was more general, please take some time to review that if you are going to apply for funding. There's a lot of important information in that, and we do not have time to go over it again. It was sent out in the reminder. It is also on our website, but please make sure to review that before submitting your application. We're also going to talk today about what funding is available, how we score those applications, what tools we use to review them, talk about some changes to our application process this year, HUD funding expectations, and then close up with any questions and comments that we still have pending. Okay, so we have a slide on here. It's just the general HUD funding announcement. The funding announcement itself was posted on grants.gov. It's where you can access the full listing. If you do not have a grants.gov application, NEH's website also has the full application posted there. But it is pertinent and necessary that you read the HUD application or the HUD published HUD info, prior to submitting any application. There is, like I said, a lot of information there, a lot of changes from prior years. So even if you're familiar, it's going to be helpful to review that. So please make sure that you have taken a look at what HUD is expecting of you as a program applicant and hopeful program grantee. So thank you all for taking time to do that. Okay, so we're going to start by talking about COC funding and eligible applicants. Want to take a moment here to make sure that everybody on this call understands the distinction between a continuum of care, the entity, and COC funded programming. So COC, continuum of care, you'll be hearing that a lot today. And a COC as an entity is a regional collaboration that is focused on ending homelessness. And specifically today, we're talking about the balance of state continuum of care in Colorado. So that is the 54 county region that excludes a lot of the Front Range. Really, it's our most rural counties throughout the state. And that is the COC as an entity. It's a little bit amorphous because it is a collaborative of a bunch of folks. But the Division of Housing is the lead agency of the COC at this point, as appointed by our governing board. So some people kind of use those interchangeably, but you do want to clarify that the Division of Housing is not the COC. Us as a collaborative is. And then there's also COC funded programming, which is what we're here to talk about today. So organizations, which we'll talk about what that means in a second, are able to apply for COC funding through the continuum of care. But the application is actually going ultimately to HUD, who makes those funding decisions. And then once an organization is funded, they then have a direct relationship with HUD. So the COC is a part of this application process. Getting your application as an organization submitted to HUD is necessary to work with the COC. But then once that funding award has been made, your organization will be working directly with HUD. You'll be negotiating your contract, talking about your budget, sending all your reporting. If HUD is going to audit the program, they're going to audit you, not the COC. So just want to make sure that that relationship is clear. That doesn't mean that once you get COC funding, then you're no longer need to consider the COC as the entity. There is still a relationship. It's just a little bit different and more nuanced. For example, each quarter, our COC receives quarterly spending reports and work with all of our grantees to track spending, see how it's going, provide technical assistance if there are programmatic challenges that you all are facing. We also are expected to monitor programs. So there's still like oversight provided by our committees, our governing board, us as the lead agency, but just want to be clear that that contractual relationship is directly with HUD. So, can we actually go back a slide? Sorry. Thank you. Want to review the eligible applicant entities real quick, because we have our letter of intent. That's how a lot of you got here. And some were not, I don't think, entities that can apply for the NOFO. So please be sure to, again, review that NOFO. Make sure that your organization is one of those. So that includes state, county, city, township governments, special districts, Native American tribal governments, public housing authorities, nonprofits with 501c3 status, and institutions of higher education. There are more, but essentially no individual people can apply for COC funding. It has to be through an eligible organization. Again, see the NOFO to fully understand that. And then more broadly, this process that we're all about to embark on is a competitive application. So organizations will be submitting applications to us as the COC. There will be a local competition, which we're going to get into detail about. We submit our applications to HUD. There is then a federal competition. We'll also talk through that today. And as a part of this process, you really need to demonstrate organizational capacity and experience in these housing programs, and community partnership. So those are like critical elements of this application process. Again, everybody who's applying must review the published NOFO, but do review it strategically. It is a very lengthy document, so consider your organizational perspective, what types of funding you're going to be applying for. I would not recommend reading it page 1 to last page fully, but really be strategic about where is important for you as an organization to understand what you're getting into when you're applying for COC funding. Okay, so let's actually talk about how funding is awarded. And again, we go into a deeper dive in the webinar we hosted last week, so please review that. But our annual renewal demand is the maximum amount of money we can apply for as a COC. That is for a little bit over $4 million, this figure you can see here. And I'm just going to kind of skip ahead to the last bullet real quick. We have received over $20 million in requests through our letter of intent this year, which is great. We have a lot of interest. I think we received 23 new program letters of interest. So there's a lot of excitement and opportunity here with this NOFO. And we can only submit a maximum of $4 million. So we are not going to be able to put forth all of the applications that we received today. And even further, it's unlikely that we will receive all of the funding that we are eligible for. Or it's maybe not unlikely, but it's not guaranteed. So Tier 1 and Tier 2, again, we go into this a little bit more, or a lot more in our last webinar, but Tier 1 is what we consider more of our safe funding. It's funding that we expect to be renewed and is competitive locally. So the programs that are in our Tier 1 are prioritized by our COC, and that's only about 1.2 million of that 4 million. And that is a reduction from last year. Then the rest of our applications are going to be in Tier 2. And Tier 2 is a combination of a handful of different funding types, but is competitive nationally. So if your program is not in tier one, then you're not just competing with people on this call, but you are competing with providers nationwide and COCs nationwide. This is something to note there. I also do want to specifically call out the domestic violence bonus funds. That is for programs that are intended to serve folks who are experiencing domestic violence. And I would look at the definition in the NOFO to fully understand what that means. But it's specifically for folks who are survivors of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, or stalking, who are also experiencing homelessness. So if that is the population that you intend to serve, please make that clear in your application so that we can make sure your application is submitted as a DV bonus funding program. So again, just kind of want to summarize that we have only $4 million that we can apply for, $20 million in requests. So this competition this year is going to be steeper than it has been in years past. Okay, so all of our renewal and new applications are competitive this year with the exception of our COC planning and must be ranked in that tier one or tier two. So that includes our youth homelessness demonstration program, which is only renewals. So there are no new YHDP funds available, only renewals, but they are competitive, just like all of our other programs are this year. And that also includes our special NOFO or the SNOFO, which we do have a project that is eligible for renewal this year as well. So I want to note that. And then I want to talk about program types that are eligible for application this year. So eligible new project types include transitional housing, supportive services only street outreach, or supportive services only standalone. And then there's also supportive services only coordinated entry and HMIS. And those I want to distinguish a little bit because those are intended to serve the entire COC. They're really capacity building grants. And I think we only received one SSO coordinated entry letter of intent, but just want to flag that those are looked at a little bit differently than our traditional like funding programs of transitional housing, SSO street outreach, and SSO standalone. And then our renewal project types include permanent supportive housing and rapid rehousing. And I do want to take time to talk a little bit more about this because our governing board, along with our rating and ranking committee, have been really looking at our rating and reallocation policy and have made a determination to prioritize permanent supportive housing above other program types. This was a really difficult decision that a lot of people put a lot of thought into. Really, the idea there is really trying to protect the most vulnerable people in our COC who are housed in permanent supportive housing. Something that we haven't talked about today, but was discussed in depth in our last webinar, is that with this NOFO publication, our COC can only put forth 20% of our annual renewal demand towards permanent housing projects. And that includes permanent supportive housing and rapid rehousing. And about 90% of our funds currently are in those categories. So by prioritizing permanent supportive housing, we are in essence like protecting those resources for our most vulnerable neighbors who need that higher level of care due to their vulnerability and acuity. So this means that most or all of our rapid rehouse, actually most, not all, most of our rapid rehousing renewal projects will ultimately need to be transitioned or reallocated to a different project type. I know this is a big change, and if you are a renewal grant who wants to apply for rapid rehousing, by all means you can. And once the applications are submitted, we may need to do some transitioning there. And ultimately, this means that we will not be accepting new projects in those categories. So we will not be accepting new permanent supportive housing applications or new rapid rehousing applications. So if that was something that you submitted an LOI for, you can still submit an application just for a different project type if that's something that your organization is interested in. Just wanted to clarify that real quick. The transition grants that I've been mentioning are only for renewal applications, or renewal applicants rather. And really the vision there is that a program will have a year to transition from one program type to a different program type. And our application will kind of walk you through that, but you'll select that you are applying for a renewal grant. It will then ask if you want to do a transition grant or a straight renewal grant. And you'll click transition, and that will take you then to the new application information, because we'll need that information to put forth that application. Okay, let's talk about the application process. We are going to cover the application itself and some changes that we have this year. Because for I think the first year, at least in my memory, we are not going to be doing our application in eSnaps. So for those of you who have done renewal applications for years, or even have submitted new applications before, we have always run this competition through eSnaps, which is the electronic COC program application and grants management system that the HUD SNAP offices use to support this application process in making grant awards. Unfortunately, the program applications are not yet available in eSnaps from HUD, and the applications are due in a week and a half. And so in order to give you all as much time as possible, we're going to be releasing a internal application, hopefully today or first thing tomorrow morning. It'll be in your email and on our website. But this is really to give you all as much time as possible to complete this application, because we are on quite a truncated timeline this year. And I do want to note too that each continuum of care runs their own application process, and our governing board and our rating and ranking committee kind of guide what that looks like. So if you are applying for program funds outside of the Balanced Estate COC, their process will be different. So just something to keep in mind if you're applying in multiple jurisdictions. Okay, so we are going to be doing our application in a Google form for hopefully sake of ease. We will also have a PDF version where you can see all the questions ahead of time. So you can do whatever like working docs your organization needs to do to complete all of the application information, but it will need to be submitted to us through Google Forms no later than the 14th of December. If your organization cannot use the Google platform, I know that has been a challenge with the VA in particular, or if your organization for some reason cannot use Google, send us an email and we will accommodate an alternative submission. But that really is intended for folks who just do not have access to Google platform. And really, we tried to simplify things. So everything will be included in this one form. So that includes our threshold checklist, audit and financial information, the submission checklist, and the application itself. And if you have done this before, historically, there have been separate documents through different platforms that we've required. Again, trying to simplify it all in one Google form this year. And we really did do our best to align the application with our scoring tools, as well as just being as straightforward as possible, knowing that organizations are only going to have about a week and a half to complete this application. So we did our best, and apologies in advance if there are any challenges there, but if you do run into any technical questions or need assistance, reach out to that DOLA BOS NOFO email, and we will provide any assistance that we can. I also just want to note that we will not be accepting late applications. We did accept late letters of intent. That was a pretty short timeline, and really the purpose of that was to get an understanding of what the interest is in COC funding this year. But we cannot do that with the application process. Our rating and ranking committee is prepared on the 15th to get their assignments, start grading applications, because we only have about a week to get all of that done. So we are not accepting any late applications. Okay, if an organization is selected by the Balanced Estate COC to submit your application to HUD, you will ultimately need to still apply through eSnaps. Again, we don't know when that application will be available. So we have a tentative due date of that of January 5th. But that will be potentially modified depending on when the actual eSnaps application comes out. And we don't know what that's going to look like. There might be additional questions in there that are not in our application. Again, we did our best to try to mirror them, so hopefully you can use your materials for the internal application into eSnaps, but there may be some additional work there needed for your organization. And we will, once it is published, make sure that you all have all of the support materials you need for getting your application submitted through eSnaps. I also want to mention the detailed application instructions. That is a really helpful reference sheet. It is linked in the COC funding competition webpage and is going to be really important for the eSnaps application in particular, but also for our general application that you're all on over the next week and a half. If that is not out in coming days or weeks, then obviously you're not going to be able to use it for this application, but we'll definitely advise that you use it for the eSnaps application. So keep an eye on the COC webpage, maybe make it a practice to check that every day and see if those detailed instructions are published. In the past, our partners and we have found them to be incredibly helpful. Okay, certification checklist. So this is a standard practice that we've done for years at the Balanced Estate COC and with a HUD NOFO in general, and must be completed for all of our new and renewal applicants. It is only one certification checklist per organization and is built into the Google form process. So it should be pretty clear, but you just need to do one. It includes some of the standard things that have been a part of the HUD threshold requirements for years, like having an active SAM.gov registration, your organization's unique entity identifier, their UEI number, adherence, confirming that you're adhering to Balanced State COC coordinated entry policies and you're pulling your referrals from coordinated entry, and among various other certifications. So please take a look at that and make sure that your organization can meet all of those. And then this year, HUD includes 2 additional threshold criteria that you have to certify. Those are listed here. First, that you will not engage in racial preferences or other forms of illegal discrimination. And second, that you will not operate drug injection sites, safe consumption sites, or knowingly distribute drug paraphernalia, permit use or distribution of illicit drugs, or conduct any of these activities under the pretext of harm reduction. So that is new in this year's NOFO, and please make sure that that is something that your organization can comply with if you're going to be submitting an application for HUD funding this year. Okay. Project quality threshold varies by program type. So this is really dependent on what type of program you are applying or project you are applying for. And for our renewals, HUD did note in this NOFO that they have the right to reduce or reject a project application for the 2 reasons listed here. First is currently or previously conducting activities that facilitate racial preferences or the forms of illegal discrimination, and or conducts activities that use a definition of sex other than the binary in humans. And then that second one is same as it was on the last slide about safe consumption sites and drug use in general. So please take a look at both of those. And then for new projects, you will want to take a look starting at page 55 and read through the criteria there. There is a minimum number of points you'll need, and it walks you through like how many points are assigned to each element, and you need to meet the minimum to be able to be awarded. But I also want to point out that you will be expected to meet 100% of the criteria if you do end up contracting with HUD under that program type. So please make sure you are reviewing those for your specific project type and are able to meet 100% of their criteria ultimately, and that you at least meet the minimum quality threshold at this point right now. And I do just want to note in general that there is language in this NOFO that HUD could choose to fund nobody. So we really hope that is not the case and want to put forward strong applications want to maintain funding and increase funding to our continuum of care. But with some of these project quality thresholds, merit review, etc., want to make sure that we are doing our best to align with what HUD is expecting of us for those programs that we're going to put forth in our applications. Okay, I think we're gonna, okay, yeah, let's pause and Kristen, it looks like you have a question then before we get into the timeline.
Sherry, can you, I'm trying to choose my words. Can you post exactly what the new definition of illegal discrimination looks like?
That I would like to, but we don't have that. So that's another reason I'm pointing to the detailed instructions, because often what happens with HUD's COC competition is they post the NOFO, there's things that are not fully defined, and then in the detailed instructions, they will define things further. So please look there for additional definitions. What we have here is all that there is in the NOFO. There's not a supplementary definition. And in general, with this NOFO, like there are definitions used that don't necessarily align with the regulation around the COC program. So we just don't have a good answer right now, and we'll look to that detailed instructions.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Sorry, I wish I had a better answer.
And similarly on some of the things we've mentioned and will continue to mention, like Jerry was just talking about this expectation to meet 100% of the criteria listed for new projects. It is unclear if and how that will be monitored right now. There's just not a good definition in the NOFO as it is currently. Hopefully we get more information on that, but just want to make you all aware of it, even though we don't have the full info. Okay, I'm going to jump into timeline next, but before I do, we've covered so much information. We're about halfway through. I do think we have a little bit of time for questions, and I haven't seen any come through the chat. Are there any questions from folks right now? Okay. One other thing I wanted to hit on, especially if you are a new project applicant, and you are like, what does project quality threshold mean? A lot of these are HUD terms. We went really in depth in this, like Jerry was mentioning earlier, in our first webinar. I sent that in the reminder email this morning to you all. And again, it's on our website. So along with the slides on our website. So definitely go back and watch that if you're a little confused about some of the definitions or the terms that we're using. Okay. So we've mentioned a lot of different dates, and I want to recap on some of our timeline, especially our upcoming date, which is highlighted there. December 14th by end of day, so 11:59 p.m. Mountain Time is the deadline for program applications, both new and renewal. So that is when that Google form that Jerry was mentioning will be due. Excuse me. December 19th, which is a Friday, by 5 p.m., all applicants will be notified of their ranking. So I'm going to talk about how we get that ranking, but between the 15th and the 19th, our rating and ranking committee is going to score all of our projects, rank them, and then share that with you all as applicants. We will also share a appeal process if you would like to appeal your score, and those will be due by December 22nd, 3 p.m. That is a Monday, and it is an extremely quick turnaround. And so I just want to call that out again. We will send you out your ranking by end of day, workday Friday, so by 5 p.m., and appeals will be due by 3 p.m. on Monday. That really quick turnaround is just what is kind of required, honestly, with the HUD deadlines and the holidays, because our governing board will be voting to approve the final rankings on December 23rd. So they will approve the final application rankings, which will also be shared with you all by December 29th. So on December 29th, we will share with you all the finalized ranking of all projects. Then on January 5th, tentatively right now, eSNAP submissions will be due. So again, if you are selected by the balance of state, your application is selected from the Google form you submitted, you will also have to submit in eSNAPs because that is required by HUD. That is tentative right now because, like we've mentioned, it is not available in eSnaps currently, and we're just not sure when it's going to be. So that is why it's tentative right now. Then January 14th by 6 p.m. Mountain Time is the HUD deadline for the full COC consolidated application. So all the rankings plus the COC application, which is also not available yet, those will be due January 14th. Okay. Wanted to remind you all in the application process of HUD's policy priorities for fiscal year 2025, particularly because they have updated them for this year. So we encourage you to read through these in detail. This is on page 12 and 13 of the NOFO, and they go more into detail on defining what these things mean. But these priorities are going to help you all as applicants better understand the merit criteria, which is essentially how HUD is scoring us as a COC, and that impacts our funding awards. So this year, HUD is prioritizing ending the crisis of homelessness, prioritizing treatment and recovery, advancing public safety, promoting self-sufficiency, improving outcomes, and minimizing trauma. And again, in the NOFO itself, it defines a little bit about what each of those things are and what they mean by that. So please go in and read those. Okay, so if you are awarded through that whole application process we've talked about and you are awarded funds, all grant agreements are directly with HUD. So Jerry mentioned this earlier, but all projects will have that contract with HUD itself, not us as the balance of state. And you will be required to meet HUD standards and reporting requirements, which have always been a fairly big lift. After HUD has made selections, they will finalize specific terms of the award and the budget directly with each recipient. This will include documentation of the required 25% match. And that has always been the case. There are new provisions this year that awarded projects will be required to comply with. There are new provisions that awarded projects will be required to comply with related to executive orders, including these that have specifically been called out in the NOFO: ending taxpayer subsidization of open borders, eradicating anti-Christian bias, ending illegal discrimination and restoring merit-based opportunity, defending women from gender ideology extremism, and restoring biological truth to the federal government. Those are the EOs that have been called out specifically in this NOFO that grantees will be required to comply with. You can read through those executive orders. However, again, in the NOFO, it does not say right now how this will be monitored or ensured that grantees are complying. But it does say that you will be required to. Additionally, awards made under this NOFO, and we've mentioned this a couple times already, but all of this is new information, so just really want to make sure you all are aware of it. If you are awarded, you will be required to agree and certify that you will not use racial preferences or other forms of illegal discrimination, that you will not conduct any activities using a definition of sex other than as binary in humans, that you will not fund, encourage, subsidize, or facilitate the use of illicit drugs, and that you will not fund any safe consumption sites or do anything that falls under the pretext of harm reduction. Again, these are all pulled directly from the NOFO as definitions. Okay, now we are going to get into a little bit more of how we score as a COC, including our rating and ranking tools, and then how HUD scores us as a whole and how that plays into the selection process. So we have what's called a local competition. All project applications are submitted to us, the balance of state, through that Google form we've mentioned a few times now. That is part of the local competition. These applications are then scored using our rating and ranking scoring tools, which I'm going to go over in depth in the next few slides. And then they are ranked from highest to lowest scoring applications. So this is part of our larger HUD application known as the consolidated application. So this does get submitted to HUD once it's finalized. Okay, rating and ranking tools that we've mentioned a couple of times now. These tools are used to help COCs evaluate project performance and rank projects based on COC priorities. These tools are required to use objective, performance-based scoring criteria and selection priorities that are approved by the governing board, and they do attempt to score how each project addresses HUD's policy priorities, recognizing that these policy priorities are going to impact what projects HUD selects to fund. New and renewal projects are scored differently, but both scoring tools are board approved. And again, these will be found on our website by end of day today, and they will be sent to everyone who filled out the LOI. We have made changes to our scoring tools this year, in particular, trying to align the best that we can with HUD's policy priorities while still keeping intact our COC priorities the best that we can. So because we've made shifts, these will were just approved actually this morning at like 9:30 a.m. and will be posted on our website hopefully by end of day. Okay, a little bit more on the process of how these tools are used. So a committee, referred to as Project Rating and Ranking, reviews these tools each year and then recommends them to be approved by the governing board. Our governing board still has final say. They vote on whether or not to approve these tools. Once they are approved, they'll be posted on our website, like I mentioned, and then every project will be scored by at least 2 individuals from this committee. The full committee then comes together to compare scores and discuss any discrepancies. Projects will then be ranked based on their scores, and the information will be shared with organizations. Again, there is an appeal time frame where you can appeal your score and ranking. We send out instructions for how to do that when we send out your score. And then after all scores are finalized, the governing board votes to approve that. It is shared widely and ultimately submitted to HUD. All of this is important because as you are doing your application, you should be looking at our scoring tools because that is what our committee is going to be using to score your application. So definitely refer to those as you work on your application. Okay, going into detail on the tools themselves. So renewal tools are scored using APRs. So they are scored differently than our new applications because they have been existing and we have data to use to score them off of. So APRs, or annual performance reports, are used to score renewal applications. We are looking at the percentage of participants who either stayed in the program or exited to other positive destinations, adults who increased or maintained income while in the program, utilization rate, adults exiting with non-cash benefits, adults who had cash income at program exit, including employment, disability, etc., and then percentage of persons exiting to positive housing destinations. Essentially, what we are trying to score on is how has this project been performing? Is it performing well? And scoring it based off those measures. New projects are scored pretty differently because they're brand new and there is no data to score them off of. So the scoring tools, when you look at them, they look quite different. Our new project scoring tool has 3 big categories here. Experience, which is 23% of possible points. And this is looking at the organization's experience in managing federal funds and any experience they have in the proposed activities. So if you are trying to do proposing a street outreach project, what experience do you have in street outreach, or what experience do you have that will make you successful? Project design and timeliness is the biggest chunk of points here. There's 57% of possible points in this category. This is looking at collaboration with relevant partners, particularly this year law enforcement, minimizing trauma, increases to employment, income, and self-sufficiency, and then addressing unsheltered homelessness. Again, once those tools are available, you can look through question by question what we will be looking at and scoring off of. And we really tried to align as best we can with HUD priorities in the NOFO and our balance of state continuum of care priorities. And then lastly, the last 20% of possible points is in financials. And this is looking at organizational audit, financial information, and cost effectiveness of the program. If you are an organization that does not have an audit, you will not automatically get 0 points here, especially because we work with only rural communities. We recognize that our smallest, most rural organizations may not have an audit at all. That is okay. You will not get 0 points there. There will just be additional questions and explanations there to give if you do not have an audit for your organization. Okay. Any questions about the scoring tools? Okay. So an overview of merit review. So merit review was previously referred to or called COC scoring criteria. It is essentially how HUD is scoring us as a COC. There have been major shifts to how HUD is scoring us as a COC compared to previous years. I would recommend the link I put in the chat earlier for NAEH. If you are interested in this in more detail, NAEH has a side-by-side comparison of last year's scoring criteria to this year's merit review. So you can see every detail that has changed if you are interested in that. But HUD did remove and change quite a bit of scoring criteria to measure COC's performance. This year, there is a total of 130 points available across 3 rating areas. So there's project capacity review and ranking of 9 points, looking at our rating and ranking process and how we are reviewing project capacity. System performance, which is 40 points, pretty straightforward there. It is reviewing how our COC is performing as a system, looking at system-wide performance measures related to reducing homelessness. And then the biggest chunk of points available, COC coordination and engagement, is 81 points. So this is looking at COCs demonstrating coordination with other systems of care that serve homeless individuals and families. Those categories have not significantly changed from last year. However, what is included in them has. So if you are interested in that, again, check out NAEH's website as they have that side-by-side comparison. Additionally, there are 19 bonus points available. There are 15 points available for COCs that have merged. We have not merged, so we are not eligible for those points. But there are 4 points in total available under policy initiative preferences, meaning that you can receive up to 4 bonus points as a COC if your proposed activities are within an opportunity zone, or if you can demonstrate that all, so 100% of COC projects voluntarily, thoroughly, and demonstrate that they facilitate immigration status verification. So those are bonus points that are available within this NOFO. Okay, wrapping us up here on how HUD actually, what is their funding process? How are they doing this? So again, we submit our final board-approved ranking of all of our projects to HUD along with our full big application for funding decisions. First awards are all Tier 1 projects. So Tier 1 projects that pass project quality, project eligibility, and risk review will be considered first by HUD to be funded. You still have to pass those things in order to be considered. Then HUD will select projects in Tier 2 for funding that still have to pass project quality, eligibility, risk review. They still have to do those things in order of project score. So again, Jerry covered this at the beginning, but Tier 1 is only 30% of our available funding. So we've got this big pot of money that we're allowed to apply for. Only 30% of it is in Tier 1. That number is a decrease from previous years where it was 90%. 70% of our funding now falls under Tier 2, which means it is competitive nationally. So in Tier 2, HUD is funding in order of project score. So a project can score up to 100 points. 50 points are in proportion to the COC score. So for example, if a COC scores 65 out of 130 points, which is 50%, then projects will receive 25 out of 50 points, which is also 50%. So there are 50 points in proportion to our score as a COC, which is most of the points. There are then up to 40 points available based on how the COC ranked your project. There are 10 points available for projects that have or will incorporate service participation requirements. So HUD scores projects based on those 100 points. They are going to then start at the very top scoring project. So a project that gets 100 points out of 100, which is unlikely, but would be number one. Their tier 2 projects that pass all those requirements, the eligibility, quality, and risk review, are going to get funded. Then they're going to start at the second top scoring project, fund them, and they're going to move down the list in order until they run out of funds. So that is actually how pretty typical for how HUD funds tier 1 and tier 2, but it's pretty different this year in the sense that there's much more projects, much more funding falls into tier 2, which is now 70% of our pot of money available when it used to be 10%. Okay, before I pass it back over to Jerry to walk through next steps, answer questions that we have time for, any questions on the rating and ranking tools or the selection process? Okay, cool. I will pass it over to Jerry.
I'd like to actually I'm going to address Cindy's question before we get to next steps and resources because it's relevant. And Natalie, actually, if you could navigate back to slide 7, I think that's where it's going to be most helpful for us. And Cindy, please let me know if I'm misunderstanding your question. The question was about capping projects that we're submitting based off our annual renewal demand. And thank you. This is our ARD, so we have about 4 million. And that's the maximum that we can submit for. And we are happy to submit $4,083,405 if we get that much in applications. I think something I want to point out, though, is that 994,841 of those dollars, I read the wrong number, excuse me, sorry. $497,420 is specific for domestic violence bonus funds. So we would need to receive that much in domestic violence specific funding for that. But I also want to, here, can you go to the next slide, point out why we are not accepting new applications for PSH and rapid rehousing. Because we can only put forth 30% of our annual renewal demand, which is 30% is about $1.2 million in permanent housing applications. The balance of state COC's rating and reallocation policy has that we prioritize renewal applications ahead of new applications. And because so much of our renewal funding is permanent housing, that 30% is going to get eaten up with renewals no matter what. So we are not going to be able to even put forth all of our renewal applications that are permanent housing to HUD because they just will flat out deny anything over that 30%. So we are not accepting any new applications in those two categories. That being said, we will accept transitional housing applications, SSO street outreach, SSO standalone, SSO CE. So we can fund or submit an application up to that amount. And we're not limiting that. It's really that permanent housing that we are limiting. But Cindy, I want to make sure that I actually answered your question. And then Vanessa asked a question. Tier 2, 10 points for participation. There are specific allowabilities for domestic violence service providers. They are not required to and not able to be a part of the homeless management information system, but have to use a comparable database. So there's like some nuance there. Happy to talk more specifically with you about what that can look like. You want to add something, Natalie?
I think that Vanessa is, well, I don't think we have an answer to your question, but is stating that for a DV bonus project to be scored, there's 10 points for required participation, which is a violation of
Oh, yeah, yeah,
AWA, is
yeah.
what
Okay,
she is stating.
sure.
Which, yeah, we don't have
We
an
have not
answer.
mentioned the lawsuits. So there
Yeah.
are a handful of lawsuits currently, and Colorado is a part of one of them, that are challenging this NOFA based off of things like that, Vanessa, that have been flagged as potentially illegal or not in alignment with standing regulations. So um, you bring up a great point, and we don't have a clear answer to that. I do think that we'll know more as litigation moves forward and when the detailed instructions come out. But again, we're happy to kind of talk individually with you all as organizations to talk through some of that and what that could look like for you. Okay, and then Monica asked a question about if an application is submitted by a fiscal agent or pass-through entity, is the score based on their direct experience in programs or the subrecipients? It's really going to be based off of what is put in the application. So you can lean on the like talk about the experience of the subrecipients that you intend to work with this program, especially in terms of like the service provision, and then also include the experience of the pass-through entity or fiscal agent in terms of their financial management. So be sure to just include anything that's relevant in the application, because we will be scoring those new applications based only on what is submitted to us in those applications. So you just need to be kind of thoughtful and discerning about what makes sense to include for which entity. And again, if you want to talk through specifically what that could look like, we can provide some additional technical assistance on that. And great, thank you, Natalie, for answering the question about the application questions. We will have a PDF of those so you can see what questions are coming within that Google form itself. Yeah, Christina.
Hi, Jerry. Curious how the geographic cap from HUD is being taken into consideration for the ranking. Um,
What do you mean by that?
so I may be misunderstanding, but I read in the NOFA that there is a restriction on the percentage of focus for each particular like county or region. I believe up to 10%. I can look it up and screenshot it and send it, but it's my understanding that they're limiting the concentration of resources to a specific region.
If you could send that to me,
Yeah.
I don't have that same understanding, and again,
Okay.
very long documents. I have read every single page, but it doesn't all stick. So yeah, go ahead and send me that. If this is relevant for everybody, we'll send it out
Great.
in follow-up materials.
Thank you.
Yeah, that it is not understanding that there's like limitations there. There are specific, so again, we've been primarily talking about program applications. There's also this like larger COC application, and there are things that we need to demonstrate in terms of like geographic coverage of our entire 54 county region, which is going to be really difficult. So there are some challenges that we've anticipated there, but I'm not sure what that is. Okay, and Mark, who's very familiar with this process, says that standard language for HUD COC NOFOs. Okay, that it's to ensure that large COCs, like large metropolitan areas, can't capture more than 10% of total NOFO funding. Okay, so that's probably more related to the total amount of COC funding available and how they distribute that among COCs, and not necessarily how COCs are able to assess funding within their geographic area. Thanks, Mark, for that clarification. It's really helpful. Okay. Thank you all for the questions. Just a reminder of our key dates. Our application, which will be emailed to you and on our website by tomorrow morning, will be due on the 14th. So you only have about 10 days to complete that application for new and renewal projects. Our ranking will be shared with you all by the 19th at 5 p.m. So please make sure that organizationally you have somebody who will be receiving that email reviewing your ranking, determining if you want to appeal, because the appeal will be due by 3 p.m. the following Monday so that we can stay on track for the timeline that we need to adhere to per the NOFO. And then at this point, any applications that are selected to be submitted to HUD for a funding request will be due in eSNAPs on January 5th, but we will keep you all updated, or any entity whose applications are moving forward, updated if there are any changes to that based off of when the actual eSNAPs application is available. Okay, one more opportunity for any questions you all have. And again, if we could throw in the chat our NOFO email. If you have questions after today, please feel free to reach out to us. We cannot help you with actually submitting your application because we are working with the committee to rank and review. We can't help inform the content of your application, but we can provide any technical assistance, clarification on what we've been talking about today. So if you feel confused on the line, understandable, and please reach out to us.
And we will send out the recording from today along with the slides. And all of this is being sent to the email that submitted the LOI. So the email that was included in the letter of intent is the email that we have been using to communicate, just so you all know, in case you have an additional email that you would like to be used. That's where it's being sent right now.
Okay. Go ahead and stop our recording. And yes, Kristen, for your purposes, where do we stop this?